When I stumbled upon the Airbnb listing for a cozy cabin deep in the remote woods of Alaska, it seemed like the perfect weekend retreat. I eagerly counted down the days until I could escape my stressful routine. But as soon as I arrived, an unsettling feeling sank into my gut. My friends and I drove for hours through increasingly dense forests. No signs of civilization could be seen out the foggy windows. Everything was swallowed up by towering pines and swirling mist. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, the sight did little to ease my nerves. It was a decaying structure with boarded-up windows and rickety steps leading to a sagging porch. Inside was no better. The wooden floors were scratched and weathered, while moth-eaten sheets covered the mismatched furniture. My friends obliviously gushed over the vintage decor, but I couldn't ignore the permeating mustiness and lingering odor of decay. As we settled into our dingy rooms, I noticed strange symbols carved into the headboards and ceiling beams. They seemed ritualistic, like some kind of dark magic. I decided not to mention them to my friends so as not to alarm them. That evening, we built a fire in the crumbling brick hearth to ward off the damp chill. Shadows flickered ominously on the walls as we roasted hot dogs and told stories. But beneath the laughter, I sensed we were all uneasy. The howling wind rattled the shutters as if desperate to get in. Later that night, I awoke to the sound of hushed whispers coming from beneath the floorboards. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but the voices seemed to echo all around me in the darkness. When I finally managed to fall back asleep, my dreams were plagued by figures in dark robes performing sinister rituals deep in the forest. The next day, we attempted to go hiking, but about a mile into the woods, we came upon the remains of an abandoned campsite. Tattered tents flapped in the wind, ripped open and covered in what looked like blood splatters. We hurried back to the cabin, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. That night, we kept all the lights on, too afraid to be left in the shadows. We tried to reassure each other that everything was fine, but we could hear heavy footsteps stomping across the creaky floorboards upstairs when nobody was there. None of us slept a wink. We sat anxiously listening to the howling wind, waiting for daylight. But when morning came, things only got worse. When I went to wash up, I discovered the water from the tap was thick and red like blood. My friends saw it too, and we all started screaming. Grabbing our bags, we rushed outside to the car. But no matter how much I turned the key, it wouldn't start. We were stranded at the haunted cabin with no way out. Dropping to my knees in the dirt, I began to sob. My friends huddled around me, faces pale with fright. We were certain we would die out here. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open. Holding my breath, I turned to see an elderly man step onto the porch. He introduced himself as the caretaker and apologized for the condition of the cabin, mentioning teenagers had recently vandalized it as a prank. He got the car started within minutes and even gave us a full refund. Though everything had a logical explanation, I still can't erase the bone-chilling memories of that weekend. The isolation, the whispers, the footsteps. Sometimes the monsters in the dark turn out to be nothing more than our own wild imaginations, but they still have the power to terrorize our minds, even in broad daylight. My wife Jenny and I had been dreaming of a weekend getaway in a secluded cabin for months, a chance to unplug from the chaos of work and city life. So, when we found a quaint little Airbnb cottage nestled in the woods outside of town, it seemed perfect. As we bounced down the long dirt driveway, I felt a sense of excitement. The cabin was situated away from the main road, enveloped by thick woods on all sides. It was cute and cozy, just as described. Inside, the living room had rustic wood walls and a stone fireplace. Upstairs was a bedroom under sloped ceilings with a wrought iron bed frame. After bringing in our bags, I noticed the cabin next door also peered out from within the trees about 100 yards away. The curtains were tightly drawn, making me wonder if anyone was home. Jenny teased that I was letting my imagination run wild, already spooked by the remote location. I laughed it off, not wanting to admit she was right. That evening, we built a crackling fire, made pasta in the little kitchenette, and cuddled up to watch a movie. The wind whistled through the trees outside, making the cabin creak and settle. As I was dozing off during the movie, the sudden shriek of the phone made us both jump. I hesitantly answered it. At first, there was only silence on the line, but then a garbled voice uttered, "I'm going to kill you," before the line went dead. Jenny and I stared at each other in alarm. I tried calling back multiple times but got no answer. Neither of us slept that night. In the morning, we went outside to find that someone had slashed all 4 of our tires. My heart pounded as I realized we were now stranded here. Why would someone do this? When I called the owner, he casually dismissed it as a harmless neighborhood prank. But his nonchalant reaction made me even more uneasy. As the sun began to set, Jenny and I locked the doors and windows. The woods surrounding the cabin took on a sinister feel in the fading light. Strange noises seemed to come from every side, cracking twigs, rustling leaves, distant bangs. Neither of us could relax. Around midnight, the doorbell rang, startling us both. I cautiously went downstairs and peered out the window but saw no one. The front door creaked open easily when I checked it, as if someone had just been there seconds before. Jenny and I clung to each other in the living room, disoriented and afraid in the darkness. At dawn, we quickly threw everything into our suitcases and called a taxi. I kept watch out the window until it arrived, unable to shake the panicked feeling that we were being watched. As the car pulled away down the gravel driveway, I glanced back at the cabin. For a split second, I thought I saw the neighbor peering out his window at us, but then he was gone. Jenny and I were relieved to get home but still rattled. We changed the locks, jumped at every little noise, and had trouble sleeping. I even hired a private investigator to try and get to the bottom of the bizarre events, but he found no leads. It's been months, but the memories still unsettle me. I find myself scanning the tree line in our own neighborhood now, just in case a face appears. While we'll never know who was behind the threats that weekend, it left a permanent mark on us. We've learned evil can find you anywhere, even your dream weekend getaway deep in the woods. The Airbnb listing advertised it as a charming wilderness retreat, but when we arrived at the remote cabin deep in the Alaskan backcountry, I immediately felt something was off. My childhood friends James, Maya, and Adnan didn't seem to notice the way the thick forest crowded closely around the weathered wooden structure, or how strangely cold the air became as soon as we stepped out of the car. But a creeping sense of unease nestled into my bones. Inside, the cabin attempted a cozy, rustic vibe with its plaid couches, cowhide rugs, and a stone fireplace. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched through the towering windows that wrapped around the great room. We tossed our bags into our rooms and headed out to the expansive deck to take in the views. Dense pines and jagged mountain peaks surrounded us as far as the eye could see. Beautiful, yes, but also isolating. As we popped open a bottle of wine and laughed over the sizzle of onions and peppers in the pan, I tried to immerse myself in the moment. But I barely tasted my food over the growing pit in my stomach. That first night, the wind screeched through gaps in the window frames like a distressed animal. I pulled the covers up to my chin, unable to tune out the cacophony of howls and creaks throughout the cabin. My dreams were plagued by faceless figures lurking just out of sight in the woods behind the house. The next morning, we hit the trail under a perfect, sunny sky. Crunching through the carpet of fall leaves seemed to ground me after the long, restless night. But as we neared an abandoned logging camp, my breath caught in my throat. The decaying wooden structures were scrawled with disturbing graffiti. An emaciated bear with patchy fur rooted through a trash bin, barely acknowledging us as we hurried by. Back at the cabin, we warmed up by the fire with mugs of hot apple cider laced with cinnamon whiskey. The coziness eased my lingering sense of foreboding, and I finally began to relax. Until Adnan suggested checking out the basement. We crept down the creaky wooden steps into the damp, musty space. Pale sunlight strained through 2 dust-coated windows near the ceiling. Our phones cast eerie shadows as we maneuvered around stacks of boxes and broken furniture. In the back corner, a mound of mildewed blankets caught my eye. I gingerly lifted the corner, recoiling at the fetid odor underneath. It was a dead dog, a collar still clinging to its decaying neck. I stumbled back in shock. As I steadied myself on a shelf, My hand hit a jutting object. Heart pounding, I shined my light on the shelf's contents. A row of glass jars stared back at me, murky liquids concealing unidentifiable organic shapes. "Let's get out of here," I gasped, scrambling back up the stairs on trembling legs. After that, none of us could eat or sleep. We decided to cut the trip short. As we tossed suitcases into the trunk, I glanced back and imagined I saw a silhouette in the trees behind the house, watching us. Back home, I described the decaying dog and mysterious jars to the Airbnb host, asking if they could explain anything strange about previous guests. They apologized for my experience, but offered no insights, only a full refund. Weeks later, I still shudder thinking about that cabin. I scour the internet searching for some indication of its history, but find nothing. All I know is evil lurked there, soaking into the walls like the surrounding mountain dampness. We escaped unharmed, but I can't stop wondering about those who came before us. Who were they? And what happened to them in those dark, endless woods?